Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Friday, August 28th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. We're talking Royals today. The shortened Major League season just passed the halfway point, and painfully so for the Royals, who coughed up a 4-run ninth inning to lose Wednesday's game at St. Louis. Beat writer Lynn Worthy talks about that game and if it could have an impact on the rest of the season. Also, the Royals made a move before the trade deadline, swapping outfielder Brett Phillips for Rays shortstop Lucius Fox. Lynn breaks down that trade. After a break, we spend time talking about Whit Merrifield's comments after Wednesday's loss. Merrifield was asked if there had been talk that day of the Royals not playing their game in light of the protests following the Jacob Blake shooting in Wisconsin a few days earlier. Merrifield provided a 3-minute response to a question from Lynn about what's happening in the country and the sports world's response to it. I think you'll find it interesting. Okay, so here we go with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy. The Royals are at the halfway +1 part of their season as they enter a 3-game series with the Chicago White Sox tonight. And we are talking with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy. We got a lot of topics to cover, Lynn, but let's start with that. It's 12-19 record for the Royals, not what they wanted, and loss number 19 was quite the gut punch when the Cardinals scored 4 runs in the bottom of the ninth of Wednesday's game in St. Louis to beat the Royals 6-5. Let's just start there and talk about that ninth inning disaster. The Royals, of course, enter that. They get the 2-run double from Whit Merrifield to give them the 5-2 cushion. Things look safe. And then, the bullpen, which has been so good, really a strength for a team that, that has a losing record, doesn't bail them out in the ninth inning. So what were let me just ask you the question that I had when I was watching the game. Trevor Rosenthal had to get out of the 8th, and then he started the 9th, and he got an out in the 9th, but ran into a little bit of trouble and had his pitch count up a little bit. Did Mike Matheny make the right move of pulling Trevor Rosenthal at that point?
I think that he made the move that he thought was right for Trevor and for the long term, and for Trevor's individual health. At least that's the way he framed it. And I mean, if you think about, that was a season high of pitches in that outing, coming off of or coming in a back-to-back situation because he had just closed out the game the night before. Matheny has rarely used him for more than 3-out save this season. I think one other time did he come in the 8th, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I think, and Matheny came out and talked to him in the middle of that 9th inning, so you could tell it was something that Matheny was worried about. And he said afterwards it was basically going batter to batter in that 9th inning once he got to a certain number of pitches, and I think they were just really worried about him. Especially a guy who's coming off of surgery a couple years ago, who was just really ineffective last year, and he and Matheny go back a ways. I mean, like their personal relationship is extended to their time in St. Louis and extended through that. That's part of the reason that's a big part of the reason that Rosenthal's even in Kansas City, or with the Royals, I should say. So, but I mean, if you're a fan just looking at it as far as the win, then no, he didn't do the right thing, because you've seen Rosenthal get out of those situations. I mean, you saw it a couple of weeks ago in Cincinnati where the bases were loaded and they got the save, and he had been perfect on save opportunities. I mean, if you're a fan, you look at that and you're saying 3-run lead going into the ninth, the bottom of the 9th inning. You got your closer on there who's been lights out, they had the only bullpen that hadn't blown a save in the majors, and they were on the edge of clinching the series and starting the second half off with a win, and saying, okay, this trade deadline and coming up in less than a week, it might be a moot point because they're going to make a run. Like, that was sort of the momentum that was building with that one inning, and it all sort of, I don't want to say stopped, but it definitely changed. It flipped in that one inning.
I'm glad you said that, because I thought maybe I was going too far to suggest that one moment, one inning could change the direction of a season. And look, not that the season was going in a great way for the Royals anyway, but they had the opportunity to pick up a win, to win a series, which hasn't, has only happened once this season when they swept the Twins back in July. There was a chance to feel good, like it was the 30th game, the midpoint of the season game. And the other thing that I wondered about as I watched that inning in the game unfold there was, you're right about the trade deadline is now 3 days away, and if the Royals had some intention of trading or really thinking about moving Trevor Rosenthal, they might have let him finish that game, let him run up the pitch count. Doesn't matter for the Royals; he's not going to be a Royal much longer. But I just wonder if in the back of Matheny's mind, he's thinking, nope, we're not, and I think Dayton Moore has said this and maybe said it to you. We're not planning on making that kind of move. In fact, if anything, we might add a player and make a run at this thing. So let's keep Trevor Rosenthal's arm protected and let's get him out of there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the trade possibility itself factored in. That's why I mentioned the Matheny Rosenthal relationship, because
Right.
I think that maybe it's the personal, because Matheny had been in touch with him and kept in touch with him when Rosenthal went through his surgery and missed a year, and then last year was ineffective and bounced around to three different organizations. I believe the last one was the Yankees, but he didn't pitch in the majors for them, but he was with the Nationals and with Detroit. And the Royals actually had interest and tried to get him last year. They were trying to sign him, but it just didn't work out. But I think the Matheny connection, that the fact that he was with Trevor when he was at his best and he had seen him go through those struggles, I think that maybe factored in more than the idea of like, okay, we got to preserve him because he's trade bait. At the same time, I don't think it's out of the question that he does get traded, especially if they sort of go in a slide here. This series against Chicago, and more so just depending on what the trade offers are. I mean, because Dayton said that about being in the hunt and wanting to try and give this team every opportunity to make a run. But at the same time, I think if they had a good enough offer for Rosenthal, that he would definitely look at that. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that if they had a good enough offer, they'd consider that.
Anybody else besides Rosenthal who might be, of interest to a contending team or a team that's in a better position than the Royals right now?
Um, the bullpen. I mean, like you got the hesitation is just I'm not sure what the rental market is for a season like this where you only have a month left as opposed to making a trade in July when you have all of August and all of September. So like last year where you trade a guy like Diekman or Homer Bailey or Martin Maldonado and you get some prospects back. I don't know what you can really push for when you're trading, whether it's a Greg Holland, who I think there'd probably be some interest in. I don't know what you're going to get, or what the offers are going to be, because whoever gets them is getting them for a month and a month of, who knows how many games, and with COVID and all the uncertainty, I don't know if you're giving up anybody, substantial. So remains to be seen, I guess. But I think
Yeah.
Holland is probably one of those guys that especially since it's as far as a rental, Holland or Kennedy has in the situation for Kennedy seems like he would be, but just his recent performance might make that a little tricky, even though he had a good outing his last couple. But so those are the types of guys who, with the short term commitments, typically you would think they would deal because you get something for them before those guys could walk. But I just don't know if that market is the same this year.
Right. And I think if we're talking about Stalmont or Barlow, two of the more impressive arms in the bullpen, the return would have to be, substantial for the Royals. I mean, they're looking at those guys with, they're obviously in the Matheny circle of trust and have just performed really well so far this year for the most part. Another guy I thought of was Danny Duffy, who's starting tonight against the White Sox, but I don't think the return would be very good on Duffy. In as much, and of course he has kind of pledged his allegiance to Kansas City in the past. But again, I think I could see like a Yankees being interested in a starting pitcher down the stretch and playing for this season. But again, I don't think the return on Danny Duffy would be substantial. Hey, before we take a break, let's cover the trade. The Royals did make a move, trading Brett Phillips to the Tampa Bay Rays for Lucius Fox. Tell us about that deal.
Yeah, and Phillips had basically they had there was just a log jam where they didn't really have a whole lot of playing time for Phillips, a lot of spots to use Phillips, and he was out of options, so you couldn't send him to the minor leagues, and you couldn't send him and Bubba were in the same boat where you couldn't send either one of them to the minor leagues without exposing them to waivers and somebody potentially claiming them. So you just didn't really have a whole lot of wiggle room with either of those guys. And Phillips right now has sort of been the odd man out, with except for maybe a couple of innings at the end of the game here, depending on what the lineup is. But Matheny had sort of settled on late in the games. He's going to put Bubba Starling in center field. He's going to bump Merrifield either to left or to right, and then he's going to probably put Dozier at first base. Like, that's defensively, that's sort of been the late inning alignment that he's settled into. And, so even that, there wasn't really a spot for Phillips in that. I mean, I think a couple games there was, if Gordo wasn't out there, or if they pinch hit for Gordo and then you had to put somebody else in left field, then it might have been Phillips. But other than that, he was just sort of the odd man out and no real options as far as being able to send them down or anything like that. So as opposed to just losing them, you get something for him. You get a young guy who's a good athlete. Seems like the type of guy the Royals like, where he's got speed, he's got some tools, he's got versatility. They think he could play multiple positions. He's a shortstop right now, but they think he could play second, and they think because of the speed, he could potentially be, a guy who could play some outfield. And he also has a lot of familiarity with the Royals because of one, they scouted him. He was an international guy who came over and finished high school in the States, but so they saw him internationally. Rene Francisco, the assistant GM, over here in the off season, he works out with some guys. Like, he was in the fall league team with Nick Heath and Khalil Lee, and then he also works out with MJ Melendez and Mike Tozar, who's been sort of the swing coach for Jorge Soler, and is now this offseason they officially added him to their minor league staff as a special assignment hitting coach is what they call him. And so he's also been the coach for the new acquisition here. And so, so there's been a lot of familiarity, and it just it made sense again with Phillips not being, not really having a spot.
Cool name, Lucius Fox. Pretty cool name.
Yeah. I saw a whole bunch of the Batman gifts as soon as I tweeted it
out. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners: unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Okay, we're back with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy. Hey, Lynn, let's change gears, talk about a couple other things. Was it Thursday, or I guess it had to be Thursday, where Whit Merrifield met the media and talked about the current state of sports and shared his feelings on that. We're going to play that during this segment.
It was after the game on Wednesday, because
okay, thank you for clearing that up.
Yep.
Right. Okay. It was pretty interesting. But that's important, right, to understand the context of the timing. On Wednesday, 3 NBA games, 4 Major League Baseball games, 5 MLS games had been called off, and then on Thursday, more NHL playoff games joined the list, and Stanley Cup. So it was. It's I'm sure not a very comfortable position for any athlete and to be asked about it. But he look, I give him credit. For 3 minutes, he provided an answer, and he came from the heart. And I thought he kind of was down the line on it without taking a strong side either way. But anyway, he addressed it. And what did you make of what Whit Merrifield had to say about this?
Yeah, so I mean, in the context was, after the game, Whit was one of the players we interviewed in the post game Zoom, and and clearly before the game there was all this different, you heard about the NBA games that weren't getting played, and then there was some baseball stuff, but keep in mind, or at least the thing I try and keep in mind, is that baseball is spread out, whereas the NBA, they're all in the bubble in the same general location. So it's easier to sort of coordinate and for guys to talk to one another and to sort of be on the same page. Whereas baseball, I mean, I think two of the games that baseball didn't play were West Coast games where they had a couple extra hours to sort of say, hey, what the heck are we doing here? Or to like at least talk things out as opposed to East Coast and Midwest. But anyway, so the Royals did play. St. Louis had two players, Jack Flaherty and Dexter Fowler, who didn't play in the game because they wanted to sit out in solidarity with the players across the country who weren't playing. Um, so we asked Whit, was there any, or actually, Flanny asked Whit the initial question, was there any thought of not playing? And Whit's initial response was like, "No, there was no." He said, "I know there was discussion on the other side, but there's no discussion on our side." And then we sort of started talking about the game, and I followed up because, for one, I felt like we were either we were doing a disservice to him or to ourselves by not asking the second question. Because if you just leave it as there was no discussion of not playing, it's like, well, it either sounds like you just sort of blew off the idea, or there was more there, but we just didn't ask. And so,
Yeah, it sounds kind of cold that way,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And what I know of, Wit and the organization and the way they've dealt with some of the things over the last couple of months with some of the social unrest and talking with their African American players about things going on in the wake of George Floyd. I was like, no, that doesn't quite add up. So I needed to ask why wasn't there? Or you see teams making these statements. What was the idea, or why was it you guys didn't really have that? And I also knew that Whit earlier in the year had talked passionately about feeling like there was an obligation to play for teammates and also for the organization and everything. So I was like, all right, we need to at least get a little more out of him. And that's when he went for like 3 minutes. And as I look at what he said, I think I break it up into two things, because there's the first part where he's talking about the we, which is where he's really sort of more speaking for the team and feeling like it was important to have that sort of provide that break for people to, what you want to call it, an escape or a distraction or whatever you want to call it, to have that for people who follow the Royals and want to be able to get away from what's going on and just enjoy the baseball game. And so that was sort of him speaking for the team. And then the rest of it, I think, sort of separate where he's sort of talking about his own personal opinions and feelings. And I think that's where, you could definitely make the case that maybe he didn't take a strong stand. And I was having this conversation with somebody last night. And I said, well, I'd rather him not go with the I'm going to have a take and stick to it. I'd rather him
Yeah.
not do that if he didn't feel like he had the standing or the background to do it. And I think he explained that, I think in his terms, he's like, oh, well, I'm a straight white guy. I mean, my my
Yeah.
opinion might not matter as much, and I can't
Right.
understand what it's like to be, a black guy walking down the street or a cop walking down the street. So I think he sort of explained why there was a little less definitive nature to his answer and more of a, trying to um, walk the line because he doesn't feel like he had the standing to be able to have a take and stick to it. So
Well,
I sort of appreciated that. Yeah.
yeah, I did too. You took the words out of my mouth. I absolutely did. That he felt the need to define himself, as he responded to the question. It's like, yes, I'll answer the question, but this is who I am, and this is why my perspective is like it is, and again, I think there was um, a moment that he probably wasn't prepared for, but he tried and he attempted to give an answer, and we're sports is such a playing such a major role in raising the awareness again of protests around the country, and this time they've gone, now there are games to postpone, right? After George Floyd, there weren't any games. Now there are games and actions that athletes can take. And you haven't heard anything about Royals White Sox tonight, have you? We're recording this at about 11 a.m. on Friday, but all systems are go for that. Is that correct?
As far as I know, and I wouldn't, I mean, and I know there were more games in baseball postponed on Thursday night, but at the same time, I mean, like Milwaukee was one of the few teams to get out in front and postpone the game on Wednesday because obviously the latest shootings took place in Wisconsin. But they
Yep.
did play on Thursday, so I mean, they did it the one day, and then they did play again the next day. And then also this weekend, you get into the Jackie Robinson celebrations because there was no baseball being played in April when you usually would have had those. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see as much of that this weekend. But I haven't heard anything either way at this point.
Okay. Hey, let's leave on this. Quick thought on the White Sox series. Chicago's won 9 of 10. They're hot. Jose Abreu is just killing it. It's a tall order for the Royals. The White Sox are in the playoffs if the season ends today. The Royals are not. But after this series at Chicago, the Royals will have 26 games left, and 17 of those will be at Kauffman Stadium. I don't know if that's a big deal in an empty stadium or not, but the Royals have had more success at home than on the road this year. My sense is if they can get through this one get a W, or even heaven forbid win a series, there's some opportunity in the second half of the schedule for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that that they'll keep, or we're assuming they keep a lot of this roster intact, without making major changes at this deadline. I think they have a chance to at least be competitive down the stretch here. Um, Yeah, I think the main things I'm looking at this series is I haven't seen the probables for Sunday, but I think because of the off day that it would seem to line up that you're going to miss Giolito, who's coming off with a no hitter, and then I would think we're not sure yet, but you could possibly see, or at least he's eligible. Salvador Perez is eligible in the next couple of days to come off the IL, so potentially haven't heard that that's going to be the case, but potentially you get a return of Salvi. So maybe there's reasons for optimism this weekend, and then after the trade deadline, you're gonna know what team you got going forward for the home stretch.
Right. There could be an old friend alert here, too. I think I saw where Gerard Dyson may be joining the White Sox here in a trade from Pittsburgh. So keep an eye out for that. All right. We're going to wrap it up. Lynn, thanks for joining us. Right now, we're going to, before we get out of here, we're going to hear from Whit Merrifield and his comments after the Cardinals game on Wednesday night. Lynn, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I say we, because I'm reflecting the guys that I've spoken to about this, and I haven't spoken to every single member on the team about it, but we feel what we do is a separation from what's all going on in the world for a lot of people. We feel like it's important for us to go out and do our job because it gives people a 3-hour window to enjoy a baseball game and to not think about what else is going on in the world. Other teams might feel different. Other players might feel different and might want to make that statement. To me, and I hesitate to even speak on the subject just because of I know who I am. I'm a straight white male, to be frank, and what I say on the subject doesn't hold a lot of weight, and a lot of times doesn't. People don't want to hear it, but my opinion on the whole issue is obviously we have some stuff going on in the world that needs to be addressed. I don't necessarily agree with the way it is addressed a lot of times, but I don't know what it's like to be a black man walking down the street. I don't know, but I also don't know what it's like to be a cop out there trying to protect the streets. What I do know is that there's evil in this world and there's good in this world. And what I also know is that love brings on love and hate brings on hate. And unfortunately, we got a little too much hate bringing on more hate, it seems, with everything going on. And to me, I've said it multiple times, I feel like the root of all this is social media, and it's driving people insane. And people get on and rant, and it just builds up, and there's just not enough love going around. And that's been my message to a lot of guys is look, I've talked to Terry, I've talked to Damon Hollins, who are the two black guys on our team, they're coaches, but I said, look guys, you guys can talk to me about anything that's going on. You guys got something on your chest and you want to talk about it, but I'm going to go out and try to love everybody just because that's what I believe. I believe you love everybody. Not everybody's going to love you back, but being the Christian man that I am, that's the number one rule that I like to live by. And I feel like we don't have enough of that going around, and I would like to see more. Obviously, people are upset, but I don't feel like the way we're approaching things is the way to get things changed. That's just my opinion. So I'm sorry if I rambled, but that was the best way I felt like I knew to answer that question.
That'll do it for today and this week on SportsBeat KC. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. A tip of the cap to Lynn Worthy for stopping by and talking Royals. You can read his stories in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands and still a good one. $30 for a year's worth of our sports coverage, and that includes the Sports Extra that comes with the e-edition. There are more than 50 additional pages of national sports coverage today. Well, here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. You get sports, news, features, commentary, analysis, and everything. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Again, that's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Monday with another episode.